Law, a series of podcasts focused on insights and learning pertaining to the implementation and use of AI in legal practice, with hosts Ian Hull and Suzana Popovic-Montag from Hull & Hull LLP, brought to you by Co-counsel.ai.
Hi, and welcome to A Better Place to Be, AI in the Law. I'm Ian Hull in downtown Toronto, and I'm joined by my co-host, Suzana Popovic-Montag.
Hello there, Ian. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Well, I've been thinking about what I've been working on since our last podcast, and one of the things I keep trying to do is the Elon Musk rule, which is when you get a task, you try to, his theory is you get a task and you're going to pass on to someone and you receive a task, you have to clean out 80% of the task and then conduct whatever the task is. So you have to scrape out 80% of the effort, and I'm trying to work my 80% rule on everything day in and day out. So it works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. But that's what's driving me right now. But anyway, we've been having some good time since we last got together. Lots of good resources out there that we've been chasing down. One of the things that we continue to be reminded of when we're dealing with AI and our transition to this different workplace, so to speak, is that AI, it's eating away at our classic time building model, but it allows us to open up to more time to do things like marketing, to do things like developing the relationship with the client, direct relationship with the client, which both gets you some potential referrals, but at the same time, once you've got the client, creates more stickiness. So I really like the idea of, when we walk away from the direct billing model a little bit by using these tools, it's opening us up to using that time to develop and enhance our one-on-ones with the clients. And what I'm doing more is I'm trying to use that time that I've got saved with calls with the client and direct contact with the client, walking through strategy, taking the time to make sure that they're up to date and current. That connection point is so important. And by using AI, I've allowed myself to have a little bit of extra time in the day to work around that.
Yeah, those touch points are so important because that is what, as you say, creates the stickiness with the client. Builds a rapport, builds the trust. Just getting a long reporting letter just isn't the way things are done anymore. And I think that human component is where, we can really use our skill set to its maximum.
And I look at it this way. I see, from a standpoint that we're developing new skills, but more importantly, new processes. And it's delivery in the service industry generally, but delivery in law is about creating ongoing processes that enhances both your substantive knowledge of the issue and the client service piece of it. So allowing us to sort of preserve the relationship, rework our processes, those are the sorts of skills that I think we're trying to develop, certainly to help with our change management. And I'm reminded, and we've used this quote before, but that 6 out of 10 jobs did not exist today. 6 out of 10 jobs that exist today did not exist at all in 1940. So we're here almost 100 years later, and we're starting to see that new processes are going to have to be developed around the technology change. But the shift doesn't replace us as humans, and it doesn't replace the need to continue to work new processes.
And the reality is our clients are starting to expect it. They're coming in, those much more educated than they were even 20 years ago, and with the internet and their self-research and their self-learning. But they're coming in and they're expecting us to be efficient, to be using the resources that are out there, and to be the best versions of what we can be as lawyers.
So talking about resources, of course, one of my favorites and our favorites is AI and the Future of Law with Jen Leonard and Bridget McCormick. And one of the things that they, on the August 4th edition of their podcast, really developed with their guest speaker was this idea of creating some sort of tangible AI competencies and expectations within your organization. And so we, learning from them, started to think about, what is the language around what does AI competencies look like and what does that mean? And we have our firm has used initially we used what we'll call our Monday sessions. And that was our starting point of the download and the education of transmitting the AI tools into our change management perspective. Why don't we just spend a moment talking a little bit about what those Monday sessions are about and were about, and then let's talk about what we've done now, and that is we learning from Bridget and others. What does an AI adoption plan look like? What does our plan look like, and what people should be, I think, be thinking about what their plan should look like. So to break that down, start with what have we been doing just as a tangible steps in terms of trying to change manage our organization.
And you mentioned the Monday morning sessions, and we've talked about them on previous podcasts. What we do is we meet as a group of lawyers at 8:30 on a Monday morning. They're about half an hour, and we are guided by our in-house training specialist who takes us through the tools. And initially, we started with Co-counsel. We were introduced to how Co-counsel works, what the database does, what kinds of skills can it assist us with. And that half-hour nugget of time, and we had people who were in person, people who were on Zoom, but the whole idea was to see the product in practice. And so we also had the opportunity to ask questions, and we interacted during that training session. And the great thing about it is, like, you got a download of information. We're new to it at the very beginning, and so learning about it was certainly incremental. But then we started to actually take that knowledge and use it during the week. And so we had a trainer come around and actually apply that lesson of whatever kind it was that day in our particular practices to our particular files. And that hands-on, actual experience with it, rather than just hearing about it or seeing it in practice, has really helped us entrench our skill set. And I think that was one of the greatest ways for us to do it, because it starts on Monday, ends on Friday, and Monday you start with a new one and you keep building those core competencies.
So it's so important that what we tried to do was make sure it happens. Like it's so funny, implementation is everything. And so we just say it's a Zoom call. Some people are in person, some people aren't, don't care. It's a Zoom call. That allows our trainer, Doug Higgins from Co-counsel.ai, comes in and does this for us. That allows our trainer to have the share screen, so everybody's got the illustration in front of them. And then, as you say, it's the direct one-on-one follow-up. And we're going to start to actually use the AI tools to sort of lift that human step out of the follow-up step out of our process as well, because I think that we also think that there's a way to follow up using AI to really not just test the understanding of the tool that we learned that week, but to also demonstrate it with some interactive aspects of it. So that we're going to try to probably move it to, my goal is to move it to a Monday morning session. We learn something, and then there's an AI a tool that will be sent around for everyone to do within the week, to walk through the tool again, being guided through with AI, and essentially test it as well to make sure that they understand it. So it's going to be, that's kind of our next phase. But right now we've got an in-house trainer who will follow it up and make sure they understand.
And because it's on Zoom, of course, you've got a recording of it. And so with an index of all of the lessons that we've had and a recording that is attached to that index, anyone who wants to go back to a lesson has the opportunity to do so. So we did a lesson on deep research, for instance, and if there's an opportunity to go back and to see what else can be done with it, then we've got that built in. And I think that's really important too, because that allows for continuous follow-up, continuous education, continuous ability to do that learning.
And so what we did was we keep a running list of the date, topic, and a link to the video. So like, as you say, We've done over 30 of them. So some of them we did a whole lesson on tabular analysis with Co-counsel. We have our own knowledge management, and what we've done is we've actually enhanced our knowledge management through the AI tools to make it more searchable and more accessible. So we had a lesson on that. We're going to also revisit some of these lessons. We're not afraid to come back and either refresh or remind the team of recent developments within it. Claude has also changed some of our abilities dramatically. And so some of the tools that we were using early on with Copilot and proofreading and so on has to be refreshed and reanalyzed. So that's an ongoing thing that we're trying to do. And that's kind of the old school hands-on, once a week approach. The thing that we also developed was what we call AI foundations. Maybe we can just speak about that for a moment.
Yeah, and actually, just before we go there, and I'm just looking at the very first session topic we had picked, and part of it was providing full context prompts. And that was less than a year ago. And just think about where our technology has gone since then. We no longer need those full context prompts. We don't need that special language. We just speak to AI and get answers. That was just a digression.
No, it's a great point. I mean, and the fact is that AI now creates the prompts better than we could create them. So that's a great point.
Now, for foundations, those were lessons that we chose to particularly focus on in terms of what we thought was the most important kind of knowledge base for both our lawyers and our staff. So we've got two sets of foundations with critical skill sets that everyone is expected to master because we believe they're so important to our day-to-day practice and correct use of AI.
So we're going to develop some of that a little further in some of our future podcasts, but that's another layer of the hands-on training we're doing with our team. But we're as you say, we're putting it almost at a different tier, and that is that these are expectations as opposed to these are helpful tools, and that's a big part of the change management messaging that we've been trying to do. They can't leave the room without basic understandings and the AI foundations. We've got 5 or 6 already. We hope to get to probably 30 before we can really say that we've touched on the core parameters of using the tools. The other thing that, and this is where we learned so much in the August 4th podcast with Jen Leonard and Richard McCormick's podcast, was this idea of creating a unique AI adoption plan. And we learned on that podcast the importance of it, because of course the idea is that if we're dealing with, and what we talked about already are just one-off tool lessons and follow-up. Sometimes it's important to make sure your team, when you're developing a change management team approach, that understands the big picture. And the big picture can only really be developed properly if you have sort of a start to finish AI adoption plan. And we're big proponents of that and have been for some time. But Bridget's and Jan's podcast reminded me of the importance to really document that. So what we've done is we've created a 1-page summary of it, and we've got it. The AI adoption plan is comprehensive. It works out to about 9 pages. So people are expected to sort of take a bit of an effort to learn precisely what the plan is. But we've adopted a 1-page summary of it. So maybe what we can do now is just spend a couple minutes talking about our AI adoption plan, and think about what listeners can think about is that how are you going to develop your AI adoption plan so that the leadership is clear as to what are we expecting at a high level in terms of our AI usage.
Yeah. And I think just in addition to the adoption component to our policy, there's also the governance component to it. So it's not just about what are the tools and when do they get used, but how are they done that how are they used properly in our system? And that comes back to, the closed system AI programs, not going out and using commercial grade and readily available free ChatGPT or things like that. So it really is making sure that we've got rules for the use of the tools in a sense.
So what we did was this, there's sort of 5 components to the AI adoption plan. One is looking at the governing principles driven by, one is what are the principles behind it? The idea that we're responsible for our work. The other part of it is what platforms are we using? Because that of course changes and will change. This plan is going to change. It's an organic document. Where AI fits in to our day-to-day practice. And then finally, what are our unbending rules? So let's talk a little bit about principles of just the usage of AI at our firm.
Sure. And the first one that we always start with is the fact that you as the lawyer or you as the staff member are responsible for your own work. So even though we can delegate, as we did in the old days, to associates or to staff members, you still are ultimately the one who's going to be responsible. The buck stops with you. So nothing should ever go out without having been reviewed by you if you are using AI or you're using anyone to help you with your task.
Right. So we're responsible for our work. It's stuff that we learned early on in our practice. We're responsible to make sure that we keep a human in the loop. And that's important from a governance standpoint, generally speaking. So most law societies, most regulators at this point, England's got a little bit of a unique perspective to it, but most regulators in common law jurisdictions have essentially said, no matter what tools you use, ultimately you must maintain a human in the loop, and that human must be regulated, or else they can't regulate the profession. So keeping a human in the loop, thinking about obviously reading carefully, verifying. That's the great thing about these tools is that they draw in the verification documents when you're creating it. So if I say that there's a fact, I've got a counter, I've got a cross-reference typically through things like Co-counsel, where you click on the document and it says, the doctor says that her mini mental test was 3 out of 50, 3 out of 24, whatever the number is, a low score. The test is attached to the summary. I hit the test to read the test to make sure I verified it. So if I state a fact, I can verify it. And then just literally the purpose of it, like rethinking, what am I putting this forward to? As good advocates, we're in the business of synthesizing, pulling together vast amounts of information. So what is the purpose of it? So Suzana, what about the platforms that we're currently using? How did we incorporate that into our AI adoption plan?
And that's a really great question, because that has also changed since we started our podcast as well. We initially started with Co-counsel and worked with Westlaw as a platform. And then we built onto that Fellow, which is a transcription program that we use with all of our telephone calls. Microsoft came up with Copilot, and we started to integrate that into our practices as well. And from a file management perspective and keeping files moving along, we've been using Slack for quite a while now. But most recently, we're very excited to notice that we're going to adopt the Claude Enterprise program into our whole practices. And I think that's going to be quite transformative, as each of these steps were every time we added something new to our repertoire of tools.
And bringing Claude Enterprise into our firm is going to be another refresh as to change management. We're actually creating a whole process to introduce it and how we're going to integrate it into our practice. So we're back to sort of how are we going to get people excited about and using the program in a measured way, and also in a way that emphasizes the unique characteristics of it. So it's another whole reboot of change management.
And it really does come back down to the fact that you can have all the tools in the world, but if you're not using them to their fullest potential, then that just seems to be a diminishing return in terms of that investment. So we're fortunate enough to have that internal training that we can continuously do with the hope that you get a maximum use of these tools.
So just a couple of illustrations away. The next part of the AI adoption plan, and this is unique to your own firm. So we do estate litigation and estate planning and so on. And so we are anxious to sort of systemize and use the tools to move litigation steps along, requests to admit, creation of affidavits and backwards and things like that. So what we did was we sort of identified the top 10 usage tools that we want people to be at the top of mind. But the last part of our adoption plan is sort of our line in the sand. We're not going to vary. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Basically, we've made it quite clear that the firm will not use AI to generate a full affidavit or the legal argument. You simply can't download that skill set to technology. That's where we as lawyers maintain our relevance and importance and expertise. And so that's sort of that one first line in the sand that we impress upon everyone.
And the second piece of it is know what the tools are good at and what they're not good at. So for example, Claude isn't going to give us the precise referencing that co-counsel will give us if we're going to talk about case law and things like that. So we want to make sure we always understand what the expertise of the tool is for our purposes.
And also the next thing we've sort of impressed upon everyone is that nothing can ever go out of a firm unverified. When you start using these tools and you start to rely on them, and you see how powerful they are, that can create a false expectation, almost correct perfection. And so when you mentioned just briefly about, clicking on the document, actually reading the document, not just that, but highlighted paragraph of the local testes for 20, but the surrounding circumstances of that, so that you've got the context for it. That's again where we can't delegate that expertise, that skill set to technology, because that's where we as lawyers are expected to shine.
And the last part of that, really, our line in the sands is this is something I do all the time when I'm just sort of non-enterprise working. If I'm on Grok and I'm looking for something, I always remind myself, never just one step. Take the first answer and then build on it. Because the AI tool they're so powerful when we can develop it beyond the first question. Okay, so anyway, look, I think that AI adoption plan, I think it's crucial. It sends a clear leadership message from the top, typically within the leadership of the firm, and each of us should be thinking about what is your AI adoption plan for your firm, and that just gives us some examples of how we.
And just to make it digestible to everyone, that summary sheet that really hits the key components of it, that's the one I think people will come back to more and more after they've read the full 9 pages, perhaps of loan policy, for instance. But having that and having it sort of front center on your workstation, on your desktop, wherever it helps build that firm culture that comes from change management.
And we don't forget your idea of putting how can AI help me with this sticker on all our computers.
It's right.
Okay, well, look, let's spend a couple minutes now just talking about Jeff Wood's book, AI Driven Leader, and some of the cool elements of what we've got come from it, because we've talked about today some specific and granular things that we're doing for change management and AI. What about more high-level concepts that Jeff Woods talks about? And where we wanted to just start today was in his book, chapter 2, I think we're dealing with it, was talking about the risks of not adopting AI. And I think well into this, we're way past the idea that AI needs to be part of our practice. We were sort of zealots early on saying to lawyers, hey, guess what? You've got to consider it. Now we're so far past that, it's about how we're going to use it and adopt it. But he uses the Nokia example as an illustration of failure of adaptation. And what I think what I got out of this part of the book was, that I thought was interesting, was this idea that, like, the naysayers in law love to go to hallucinations. And I've always felt that that's such a lazy way to critique AI, because hallucinations just means bad lawyering. because it wasn't checked and it wasn't verified. And so, and it's no different than taking an articling student's memo and saying that's exactly right without your own verification before you present it. But the Nokia example is one that reminds us that it's not just about the problems that AI can bring. It's about making sure that we adapt and we adapt quickly. We talked about the Blockbuster example versus Netflix and the idea that Netflix came to Blockbuster and said, let's partner and let's try to, Blockbuster just laughed at Netflix and look at where they are today. The Nokia was the same thing. He talked about the idea that it dominated the market and they just failed to adapt. And we were past adopt. Now it's adapt. And I think that there's a difference there. We're in the business of words, because adopting AI is something that I think now most lawyers have said, okay, I'll accept that I have to adopt it, some element of my practice, but now it's about adapting and taking those tools and actually using them on a day-to-day basis efficiently and effectively. And Nokia was just an example of where they had controlled the market and of course, complete collapse. Nobody has a computer phone anymore as a consequence. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of fun because we're in the business of words and adopt and adapt matters in that respect. Why don't we talk about of course the second part of that I want to let you talk about is that what are some of the lessons that past technology revolutions taught us that we highlight?
The first one was the whole concept of a printing press. And I really like the way that Jeff described it in terms of that democratizing, that's it, sorry, knowledge and information. Taking knowledge and information and bringing it to the common folk in a sense, right? Because in the old days, without typewriters and without printing press, so to speak, people would only be able to write things down, and it was the only way that knowledge was able to be translated and transformed and shared with others. And so when this whole concept of the printing press came into place, of course, just like with any change, there was fear that was felt, there was resistance, there were concerns over power struggles and things like that, until people got comfortable and started to adapt the concept into their own private practices. And then suddenly we saw that this information was being shared to people who were common and not just the elite. So in a sense, that's a little bit like AI, right? Like we're taking information that is out there and suddenly it's going to be available to a greater cross-section of the population. And in building from that printing press, there came the assembly line idea, right? We were taking the efficiencies that came from earlier ways to do things and taking that and transforming it to the goods and services and production and manufacturing component of making things. And again, using the tools to increase the value of the product, make it more accessible to everyone. And that, of course, brings efficiencies, lower costs, and but it also brought with it a little bit of a concern over the skill set and what was happening to the skill set. It started to devalue craftsmanship, but it came expensive, for the economic growth. And so when you're looking at the leaders and the kinds of visions they're having, there is a trade-off. And I think that's what we saw with that whole analogy there as well.
All right. Well, look, I think Jeff Woods has been so good about sort of teaching us to not just how, but the why to adapt, and as opposed to adopt. and we're going to talk the next time we get together. I want to talk a little bit about where he talked through some of the shifts in the operational mindset and some of the methodologies that he uses are fascinating with the concepts of a composer metaphor and so on. But that's going to be for another day. We've covered a lot today. Really great to see you again and great to catch up. Reminding everyone, please press follow. That really helps us in terms of the algorithms. So if you could, on any whatever source you're listening to us or watching us, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everything. But And then we want to thank you, Suzana, for joining today, and we want to remind everyone that we are in a better place, and we are in a better place to be at AI and the law. And thanks so much for listening.
Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
You have been listening to A Better Place to Be, AI and the Law, with hosts Ian Hull and Suzana Popovic-Montag from Hull & Hull LLP, brought to you by Co-counsel.ai. If you have any questions or comments, please email our office at info@cnsl.ai. Thank you.